that it didn't need to be a secret, that it could have continued to be a celebration of my womanhood, of my humanity, and that it was a sign that my body is working as nature intends. And I also wish I knew that it meant that I could look to my cycle for clues, not excuses, but clues as to how to manage my health in a more holistic and supportive way. Because I didn't have that knowledge, it really fed into the narrative of the time, which was about working against yourself, pushing through, keep on going, regardless of what your body is telling you. I wouldn't have worked in that way. And I think that perhaps I would have had more of an opportunity to do what I'm doing now, which is to be guided by my own North Star rather than following the whims and the systems of other people.
Do you feel differently about your period now, having incorporated this, the idea of it being a vital sign, the North Star, listening to your cycle and your hormones for clues?
Tracking my cycle and understanding the natural ebb and flow of my hormones has been absolutely game-changing. It's been one of the most fundamental parts in me being able to connect with myself with real depth and meaning. And it's really helped me to understand myself as a natural being. I think that we walk around quite often feeling like our mind is in one place and our body is somewhere else. Whereas in my personal development journey, in my, training and whatnot to become a life coach, thinking about women, learning about how my cycle impacts me has helped me to really be kind to myself and remind myself to meet myself where I am. So, we're all human beings. We're all quite similar, yet very different. But that whole thing about being very cognitive and living in my head, tracking my cycle helps me to connect to my mind and my body. So rather than focusing on what my head tells me I should be doing, tracking my cycle and using apps to remind me of where I am in my cycle helps me to connect mind and body so that I'm actually working with myself. So thinking about nature, if you look in a garden, there's a variety of flora and fauna, and they bloom and blossom in different ways, but using similar principles. And that's how I think about myself. Okay, today I'm a daisy, so I need more tenderness, I need more gentleness, I need to go at a slower pace if I can. And if that's not possible, I know what I need to put in place to support me being a daisy amongst oak trees. And then I have other times when I am an oak tree and I know how to support myself during that time. Also, it's helped me to curb parental irritability, because the realness is sometimes your children are really irritating, but not because they're being irritating. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but because of where you are in your cycle or whatever you've got going on, an average thing that would be a nice conversation on some days can be a major source of irritation. So it just helps me to check in with myself and give myself some context, so that not like I'm censoring myself all the time, but I've got that information. So rather than being in a situation where I'm snapping at my daughter for something that she should be doing, as the snap starts to come, I remember where I am in my cycle, whatever else I have going on, and do whatever it is I need to do so that I can show up for her in a way that isn't full of grit and irritation. So yeah, and it's really helped me. We have all of these goals and these dreams. I want to be doing this. I should be doing that. Next year, I want to be able to do whatever. Okay, you want to do all of these things, and these things require consistency. I know day 24 to day 28, consistency goes out the window. So I give myself the grace of doing whatever I can during those days, but also knowing that like day 8 to 12, I'm dynamite. I am literal. Even maybe it's even 8 to 14, because the dynamite kind of evens off when I start to get my ovulation pain. But I can do a month's worth of work during that period of time because I'm just on fire. So it's just learnt me to recognize my natural ebb and flow and not use my time when I'm at my peak as my baseline. I know that that's a peak. It's not my general. Whereas before I would be like, why aren't I churning out the work? Why aren't I being as productive as I was last week? That should be my standard. No, that's not my standard. That was my standard for that phase. My standard is different this week. So yeah, it's been a major source of me being not just compassionate, but empathetic with myself.
It's amazing how in tune you become with your cycle, how it affects your moods, your energy levels, and also your mental capacity, and how you have tailored your work to, when you can, to those phases of your cycle. And this idea of compassion, I think, is really powerful, because so many times I hear women, they beat themselves up because they say, well, why am I not focused? Why can't I get the work done? And, why was I able to do so much work last week, but this week I'm so tired? And they just push through to their own detriment, but also you don't blame them, because we've been given these messages by society that we need to live in masculine energy, which is go, go, go all the time. But everything that you've been saying is around honoring this idea of feminine energy, and knowing that the ebbs and flows of the menstrual cycle have a big connection with our energy. And when we honor that, it is actually so much better for us.
Absolutely. It just enables you to acknowledge that you're human, you're not a machine, because I think we tend to treat ourselves like we're an iPhone that can be upgraded and rebooted and whatever else. And actually, I'm at my most powerful when I'm really honoring myself. Like, don't get me wrong, I do think that we need, there's masculine and feminine for a reason. So masculine structures, like using my diary, which is quite like, that's kind of structure is quite a masculine way of thinking, but using that structure to support my femininity is really helpful. So when I'm paying attention and I'm being mindful, where possible, I structure my workload accordingly. And I know that it's easy. I know that people can sit down and think, well, it's easy for you, you work for yourself. But if you look at your workload, as long as you're doing your work within timescales, you can make, where possible, make allowances for yourself. So if there's a presentation that you need to do, is it possible that you can schedule that presentation during week 2 of your cycle, for example? And if it's not possible for you to do that, what can you drop from your schedule that will allow you to have the space that you need to recharge and restore if you're needing to do that presentation during the run up to your cycle? What can you do to make sure that you're feeling vital, that you're feeling alive, rather than dragging yourself around? Even there's a lot of mothers that I speak to that are constantly scheduling things upon things upon things upon things for their children. Actually ask yourself, who is that serving? Is that really serving your child? Or is that serving your need to say, I'm doing all of these wonderful things for my child, I'm really enriching my child's life? Because actually we are depriving our children when we want to make sure their schedules are full all the time. Them being bored and just playing around and being soft and crashing around on sofas is really beautiful and really essential development for them. So do you need to be running yourself ragged, jumping from pillar to post, doing all these things? Are all there times in your month where you can slow down and do things at a slower pace? with your children? Could you occupy them with more slow and mindful activities that supports you as well? Because motherhood and martyrdom are not adjacent from each other, contrary to popular belief. And I just think really tuning into what your body's telling you just creates such freedom. And something else that I noticed is that I have been less bothered about what other people think, feel, and say in relation to what I'm doing since I understand how my cycle works. So, for example, if, friends and family want to see you, blah, 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 and they'll say things like, you just got to make an effort. No, I don't. If I'm at a point in my cycle where I'm feeling depleted, I am not going to take myself closer to burnout to meet your need and neglect myself. Like that is actual neglect. That is actual emotional abuse. And I know there are really strong words. I'm using them with intention. As a social worker, my area of interest was neglect and emotional abuse. And when you distill it, it's the same thing, but applied in different ways. I'm not neglecting or emotionally abusing myself so that you can feel good that I was eating, I don't know, curry goat and rice and peas at your party. I can see you another time.
You've said so many interesting things there. I wanted to circle back to what you said about the way that you speak with your daughter, mm-hmm. and how you're more aware of things that might be irritating at certain times of your cycle, and mm-hmm. things that you kind of would just be normal. In all of the things that you've learned about and applied to yourself, how has that changed the way that you speak to your daughter about periods and about menstrual cycle, if you've had that conversation yet?
We've been having that conversation. So from the moment I became pregnant, so as I said, my mum's an open book. You can talk about everything, but the emotional element, like the feelings part of those conversations, are not something that she was brought up with and not something that she's used to. Like, she's quite a stoic person. And I really enjoy conversations about the depth of our emotions. I'm not skating around on the surface. I want to get below the surface and see what underpins those feelings. Where do those feelings come from? So from the moment I became pregnant, I was having deep and meaningful conversations with my unborn child from that point on. So whatever conversation she comes with, we're having that conversation. And sometimes we're having a conversation that starts with something that can seem quite light and fluffy, but I really try to get her to look beneath that so that she understands how she's operating rather than being on autopilot. So I've had conversations about periods with my daughter since, there was one day, she was 3, we were on the bus, and we don't often go on the bus. And, 3-year-olds, their voices are loud.
Yeah.
So she was saying something about those nappy things. She was talking about sanitary towels. So I didn't have the conversation with her on the bus. It was almost like the bus went dead silent as she said, those nappy things. So we had a conversation about what the nappy things are. And it was just in a very childlike way. I didn't talk about, blood or anything like that. I just said that when you're a grown-up, sometimes you need to wear these nappy things. And that was it. She just left it at that. But I'm very open. She sees me naked all the time. I'm all around the house. I'm not hiding sanitary products. So I can't even remember really the first time we had a proper conversation about periods. But when she was in year 5 or 6 and they had a conversation about puberty, She was like, oh, Mum, it was so lame. It was so basic. I knew more than the teacher. Obviously, she didn't know more than the teacher. She knew more than what the teacher was presenting. So it's always been a very open book. I've